Step into a world of romance and mystery with Tamora Rose. Today we're reading part 1 of chapter 9 of Child of the Wind. 2 hours had passed before Jett stormed up the steps, flung open the door, ignored his manservant, and stomped to his bedchamber. Once there, he stripped off his torn and bloody shirt and examined his wounds. The damned dog had latched on and refused to let go until Knace had called him off, and the attack had left deep puncture wounds in his upper arm. Fortunately, it was his left arm and not his right, but that didn't calm his burning rage. Neither had the 2-hour ride. He was angry, and there was no denying it. A firm knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "What?" he snarled. The door opened to reveal his brother. Edward sauntered in, unperturbed by Jett's foul mood. The blood on his brother's arm stopped him cold. "What happened?" Ed asked. Jett almost shook with anger. "That damned dog of hers bit me." "Bentley?" That was surprising. He thought the dog was sweet enough. "I was sure he was still with Knace, and she hasn't risen yet. He sleeps in her room, apparently." "And don't think I won't put a stop to that." Retrieving a wet cloth, he started wiping away the blood. "And those damn lambs. Everything goes just as soon as we're married." Edward's mouth quirked as he lowered himself into a chair. "Resigned yourself to the marriage, then?" "What? Hell no! Where did you get that idea?" "You said it. I didn't." "I hate that damn dog." He threw the cloth across the room and went to find a clean shirt. "And that girl needs a damned good beating followed by a damned good bedding." He pulled his shirt on with angry movements, which meant it wasn't buttoned correctly, but he didn't give a damn. "Last night you thought she was lovely," Edward pointed out. Jett grunted as he threw himself into a nearby chair and said nothing. Edward studied him for a moment. "Are you angry at her, the dog, or yourself? Now you sound like Mother." "Thank you for that, but you didn't answer my question." Because he didn't really have an answer. All he knew was that he was damned angry. At the dog for biting him. At Knace for overreacting. At himself for starting something he hadn't been able to finish. The entire situation didn't sit right with him, though he wasn't sure why. "Let's back up," Edward suggested. "How did you get bit by a dog between last night and right now? The dog is still in her bedchamber." "He wasn't this morning." When he saw his brother's look of confusion, he explained. He went through his morning, starting with his ride and ending with the wild gallop he'd hoped would relieve his spleen. It hadn't, but that was another matter. In the end, Edward only blinked at him. "What?" Jett snapped. Ed shook himself. "Let's put aside for the moment that your bride rides about the countryside in her nightclothes at dawn. And let's put aside the fact that Mac would kill you if you bed that girl before you properly wed her. I think I'd rather focus on why the hell you didn't let her go the moment she pulled away." The conversation had taken an uncomfortable twist. "You make it sound like I was going to rape her." Jett shifted in his seat. "No, you made it sound like you were going to rape her." Now Jett decided it was time to get defensive. "I didn't hurt her." "Stop right there." Ed sat forward until his elbows rested on his knees. "If I understand you correctly, you held her down and touched her breast when she screamed at you to stop. Accurate?" When phrased just that way, it did sound a little dastardly. His older brother cocked an eyebrow at him. "A simple yes or no will do." "I wasn't going to hurt her," he repeated. "Did you at least apologize?" Jett shrugged. "She ran off with that damned dog before I could." "And you didn't find her later?" Ed waved a hand. "Never mind, I already know the answer." "And I have to say, for a man who has had more than his fair share of female companionship, you know remarkably little about living with a woman." "What's that supposed to mean?" Edward stood and moved toward the door. "It means that your married life is going to be hell if you don't figure out a way to live with her." Kicking a stool with his booted foot, Jett looked away. "I'm not even sure I'm going through with the marriage." "You don't have a choice. Resign yourself." The door made a familiar creaking sound as he pulled it open. I was going to invite you and Canace to join Nora and my own distinguished self on our ride this afternoon, but I don't think that's going to work out today. Perhaps tomorrow. Or maybe not. Jett only glared as his brother left him alone with his thoughts. He wasn't sure he liked being alone with his thoughts. The truth was, he felt badly about the way he treated Canace. Never in his life had he actually hurt a woman, and though he hadn't actually hurt Canace, he knew he'd frightened her. She was an untried virgin. He had gone too fast and held her down when she'd objected to his touch. That wasn't well done of him. Maybe he had deserved to be bitten. He still hated that damn dog, but he couldn't exactly fault the beast for protecting its mistress. That's what dogs did, after all, and if the dog hadn't intervened, he wasn't sure what he might have done. Maybe he owed the mutt for preserving the purity of his bride until the wedding night, a night now filled with anticipation. Disgusted with himself, Jett rose to pour a brandy. He didn't want to marry her. No, that wasn't true. He didn't want to be forced into a marriage not of his choosing. As the younger son, the one who wasn't to inherit the dukedom, he had always had more freedom. He had fewer duties, almost no responsibilities, but plenty of money. The last time he'd been forced into anything was when he was 7 and refusing to learn to read. That one might have worked in his favor, but he didn't want to be forced into something now, not when his life was exactly how he liked it. Then there was the small matter of the earldom. By the king's decree, Canace's husband would become the next Earl of Barslan. Jett wasn't sure he wanted to be an earl at all. It was bad enough that he would one day inherit his father's more minor title of Viscount. He didn't need an earldom on top of it all. It was much better to be rich and untitled. Having money but no real responsibilities was definitely the way to go. Sipping his brandy, Jett thought of the money she'd bring him. Canace was wealthy, so marrying her would make him immediately richer than his father, richer than his brother, possibly even richer than the king himself. The money was an attractive part of the package, even if he didn't crave the title that went along with it. And the package itself, well, he couldn't pretend to be immune to Canace's beauty. She might be a little short for his tastes, but everything else about her was perfect. The hair, the eyes, the face, the body, each on its own would have been enough, but as an entire package, Canace was the very image of beauty. His betrothed might just be one of the loveliest maidens in England. Yes, she was lovely, but he wasn't exactly impressed with some of the things he'd seen. What kind of woman raced around the countryside in her nightgown and an untied robe? Canace, apparently. The horse had been unsaddled, so she rode bareback and astride instead of using a side saddle. Jett frowned. A side saddle was a necessity if she was going to be his wife. There was no way he would allow his wife to ride astride, especially on a mare as wild and untamed as Epona. Thoughts of the horse led directly to thoughts of the lambs and that damn dog. That was something else he had to change. According to Mac, she slept with both the lambs and the dogs. When she was his wife, all 3 of them would sleep in the stables. He was not sharing his bed with 2 sheep and a mutt. She, of course, would expect to have her own chamber, one far separate from his. Separate bedchambers were in fashion just now, but Jett didn't care. If he was going to marry her, he would damn well sleep with her each and every night. There was, therefore, no need for separate bedchambers, and he didn't care if she liked it. Well, maybe he did care, but not enough to give her a separate bedchamber. It was all moot anyway, at least until he decided whether he'd marry her or not. King's orders be damned. It was his life, his future, and he would not allow it to be dictated by another. He'd marry her if, and only if, he thought they'd get on tolerably well together. As things now stood, she was probably hiding from him, and he wasn't entirely sure he blamed her. He also wasn't entirely sure they could ever live in harmony, or at least live without being at war with each other all the time. She was too wild, too undisciplined, and too mouthy to suit him. Jett was a fan of order, which was exactly why Tilda had been perfectly suited to him. Canace, on the other hand, might just make his home life a living hell. Tossing back the last of the brandy, Jett stood. As her husband, it would be his duty to discipline her. He might as well start out as he meant to carry on. If she wouldn't bend to him, if he couldn't force her to obey his will, he simply wouldn't marry her. Decision made, Jett left his chamber, fully intending to seek her out. A few quiet inquiries later, he realized she was still in her bedchamber. At first, he was tempted to visit her there, but after what had happened on the bluff, that was probably a bad idea. He grew hard just thinking about entering her private chamber. She was probably still in her night clothes, making her far too tempting. If there was a bed available, he wouldn't be responsible for his actions. Instead, he made his way to the small study he sometimes used. It was empty, making it perfect for his purposes. Once he was settled, he summoned a servant to bring Knace to him. Then he sat back to wait. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this chapter, stay tuned for more tales of romance. Until we meet again, may your days be filled with passion and just a touch of magic.